Hello, my name's James. I'm a portrait photographer from Portsmouth in the UK. You've probably not heard of me, and I welcome you to this, the latest video on the Portrait of a Wrestler YouTube channel. And we're looking at portfolio reviews again. And Arvind Ahluwalia has sent in some images. I know him from the world of wrestling, and also he's a keen runner. Always a pleasure to speak to him on social media channels. He's been brave enough to send in 10 images. Doesn't describe himself as a professional photographer, as a keen amateur rather. And everyone is welcome to submit images for portfolio reviews. You don't have to be a professional. I'm very, very happy to look at anyone's images and hopefully offer some positive, constructive feedback. We're going to be looking at elements of composition, of posing, of lighting, of post-processing and of technical skill to hopefully give some constructive feedback and take everyone's photography to the next level. So let's deep dive in. First time I've seen the images here, they look like from when I downloaded them very quickly, looks like they've come from all around the world, but it's my first look at them with you now together live. So let's have a look. Now, got quite a high angle on this one. The first thing I'd suggest is we've obviously been quite brave in terms of trying to do something different with this colour popping. My personal opinion with regards to colour popping, it can be used super effectively. Quite often I think it sort of detracts from the simplicity of an image. I kind of think George Michael nailed it when he was strumming a guitar in a blue denim jacket and everything else was black and white, and kind of like everything else since has kind of fallen short of the mark. And in this instance I'm not entirely sure it needed it, but I see what we're doing. We're tying up the reds in what we're wearing with the reds in the fabric, and actually the reds in the fabric, I think actually it's quite an interesting effect. But the light coming in from the left hand side here is giving us some really keen contrasts on some of the areas around the image. There's nice leading lines leading us into the portrait. Just some distracting elements in the background. This area here is super highlighty just around the side here, and then just some lines coming out of the top of the hat and everything in there. Really, my instinct is to go closer on this one. This expression, this tiny bit of face just leading you in underneath the hat, the way that the hands are in there, and I want to learn about these hands. I think these hands are going to tell a story of someone who's done this, you know, hundreds and thousands of times throughout their life, and just using the pattern again without this color toning in it would have been interesting enough anyway, I think, and I think there would have been enough interest in there to see how this would have worked. I just think getting in a little bit closer, using the lines in the background along the floor with the lines in the fabric, with the leading lines up to the face would have worked perfectly. So I think we just tried to overcomplicate a very simple narrative there. This is an interesting wide shot. So not only have we taken a step back from this image, we've also chosen a wide angle lens. The leading lines from the top all the way up to the archway are great. A little bit of heavy vignetting on the top here, just a little bit dark in there for me. A little bit of attention to detail. You're going to have all of these little things like this little thing here, and the little motion sensor on the wall. They're all just little things that can just be, you know, lost in with little clone stamps and the plug one on the wall. Just lose those with little healing brushes or clone stamps or whatever you need to do to get rid of those here. But a lovely little moment here. I love the hand placement on the table down here. It's just lost in the vignetting again, just need a little bit of light in here. Love the hand placement on the tie. Hand placement are difficult things to get right, and actually it's quite nice the way that the hand's been placed in there. The shadow detail here though on the face, on the headwear, on the tie, on everything there, it's just gone a little bit dark. And we needed to see a little bit more quality of light, so potentially like a wider aperture, something like that so that you don't have to compromise on shutter speed, and the wider or on quality in terms of ISO. So maybe investing in a lens that goes up to a 2.8 or something to allow a bit more light in and just get a bit more light in that detail. But as a moment, I like the scale of it. I like the fact that when you go in close, he looks like a tall man, but actually in the scale of this, he actually looks quite small within that, and I think that increases the sense of vulnerability. Don't like the way the radiator and the frame there are coming out of the side of the frame there. I think that clutters the image. Again, out of your control. Just a little bit of attention to detail there. Oh, this is interesting. Is it good use? Right. Okay. So first thing that jumped out at me is it's a really interesting landscape in a portrait form, which I love. That's a little bit different. Let's just go and have a look at some of the detail. Second thing I'm going to say is wonderful use of negative space. We've really accentuated those rules of thirds, and the skyline really draws your eye actually to what is a really dramatic skyline in the bottom. that on its own in that crop there, when we go in super, is actually really interesting. But to actually make the decision to go portrait is really, really brave. It's a little dark on the vignetting again, just at the top, where the sky's just gone a little bit dark. It would almost be better if that was a bit more uniform, I think. It's just a bit blocked up in the blacks, and it's just distracting ourselves away. I almost think we've gone a little bit too far with it. There's not a lot of cloud detail in there. A little bit more care in the post-processing in the black and white might have brought out a little bit more cloud detail in there. But it's interesting. I like people who don't go for the obvious, and the obvious thing I think to go here would have been to look at that landscape and go boom straight in the bottom as I did there, and to actually do something different and turn it into a portrait is actually a really, really dynamic, creative idea. It just needed a bit more interest, I think, in the top half, or nothing at all. So if we had a bright blue sky, and I know this is out of your control, I'm saying I'm not asking you to change the weather, but if we had a bright blue sky right up above, then that's a really dynamic use of negative space. It's just the fact that the clouds here, what I'm saying is I think the clouds are just a bit lopsided. They're all over on one side really, which is just a bit unnerving in this negative space. Again, a good use of viewpoint really, actually. This is super interesting. It's crying out for a model to be stood in the middle of that with that light. So obviously it's at a very challenging time of the day where light streaming through, hard light there on the left hand side, but it's well observed, good leading lines. There's just no, and when I say it's crying out for a model, there's no point of interest. Your eyes going around the frame, but I don't really know what I'm looking at. It's too wide to go into it, if that makes sense, to go into the middle of it, because there's too many distracting elements here at the top with the leading lines at the top and at the bottom. So I'm not really being taken through the tunnel. It feels too narrow to go through it anyway. And there's nothing really working there in terms of where I'm supposed to be looking, and no depth of tonality. Everything's got this sort of like, we haven't really gone to town on making those dark areas dark and those white areas white. And I think we've also taken it, it feels to me like we've taken it at standing eye level. And just changing that by coming down low can really give the viewer something different, a completely different viewpoint. So I'm imagining that I would walk out here and see it like this if I was just walking around, whereas if you take a lower angle, you're making more of these shadows on the floor and drawing your viewer's eye into the frame, whereas we're right in the middle of the frame really. It's very central where that pathway is going to. That's why I think almost like losing the top of it. We'll just give it a quick crop here, just have a look at it. But if we just lose the top of it, like so, we may automatically, we've made it a simpler image straight away. But it's a shame because the leading lines at the top are actually quite interesting. So there's an idea there. It just needed a little bit of experimenting in terms of, I think, your angle and your choice of lens. So if you're on a zoom lens, you know what choice you made, just to give us a little bit more interest there, really a point of interest, I think. And a subject in the foreground, or sorry, in the midground would have really helped that. Very moody, this one. Very moody indeed. It's good because it invokes that. I mean, it's obviously some sort of rain shower coming. It looks like a really, really dramatic weather front. It looks really gloomy, and I feel that that's where it's letting itself down a little bit as well. There's no pin sharpness on the water. There's a tiny bit of reflection down here. Can you see that? Which is just taking out the tonality of it. And I think in order to make this rain shower in the midground here look really dramatic, you need your lighter areas, particularly in the clouds up here, and particularly in maybe in a bit of the water as well, to really, really make it stand out. Instead, it's all on this sort of mid to dark grey palette. It just needed a few more lighter areas to drag your interest into that area there. The whole thing feels a little bit soft. So I feel like I'm there. It feels like a really, really dull day. I feel like I could, I could be transported there, but it doesn't really jump off and jump out and grab your attention like a rainstorm like that should do. So just maybe just a bit of control. Have a play with bracketing in your camera. So when you play with bracketing, it will take you a stop over and a stop under to give you multiple exposures, so you can sort of, like, when you're processing them later, sort of choose the right one rather than having to make the decision at the time. But yeah, interesting idea, that one, if a little soft. We've gone here again with the colour tonality, which again I think is almost distracting my eye again to, I don't think it needs it again. I think you've got really nice light on that handrail actually, where the top of it's gone into white. And you've got lots of grey tones in here, everything from blacks to whites. It's really it's quite nicely handled. Another dramatic skyline. Good use of the pathway underneath. Just maybe a bit of dodging in there just to bring out some of those stones, make them a little bit whiter. And there is a leading line down the stairs. You almost need to come out this side a little bit more. Lose this guy in the background here who's walking down and is just distracting and not really part of this empty narrative. So this area here, this almost like this 2/3 on the right hand side of the building in the background, the stairs coming down and the pathway leading up to the light, is really interesting and working really well. It's such a shame it's cluttered over here with boats and with the edge of a van and with the top of a very, very bright roof and a ferry and a bit of railing and some modern sort of looking flats. Do you see what I mean? And again, it's something that's out of your control, but maybe in terms of your positioning, again with these shots, less is more. So you're looking at what elements are distracting and taking them away. But there's a good control of light in here, and once you can start seeing things like, I'll refer back to it again, but the white in the handrail to the dark in the brickwork coming down here, and you start looking at those, plotting those grey points in between, then you're well on the way to sort of controlling these black and white images and really controlling the narrative throughout the frame. Really interesting shot here, all the way from the texture of the smoke and the forest at the top, all the way down to the texture of the water down below. We've tried to do one of these short shutters, these longer shutter speeds to get a bit of movement in the water. I think you need to go a little bit further with that, so that means investing in a tripod, sticking your camera onto a low ISO. If you still can't get the long exposures, and by long exposures I mean a second or longer, then you need to invest in neutral density filters, which will go across the front of the lens and restrict the light coming through and allow you to take these long exposures, so that this water in the foreground can really create a texture that really then works against the rocks and really works with the mist at the top as well. And it's got a lovely sort of texture to the whole thing, but I think it would really have benefited from that, and potentially even like a bit of a wider crop. It just feels a little bit narrow there, so really increase the drama by going a little bit wider with your lens choice on this. Good use of symmetry here, a bit heavy on the vignetting at the top. When we look at the top of this frame here, you'll see how dark it's gone. We've got virtually no detail in the lamppost here, and a bit of haloing just around the edge. So I think we've just tried to go a little bit too far. But a good use of symmetry on that bridge using the puddle, which I like. Do you know what? Actually, I think you could crop a little lower in this one, and here's the reason why. The top of the lamppost is actually cropped off in the puddle, so to actually mirror that with a cropping of it up the top here would actually be, I think, would be genuinely quite interesting, and might lead to a slightly keener composition in terms of like your in terms of like your symmetry. Not many light tones in this one. Again, we've gone mid-grey or darker. It's a good idea. I think we just needed a little bit of refinement, and potentially it's quite harsh lighting as well, I think, on some areas of it, so maybe looking at a different time of the day to shoot something like this. It's difficult to control these things, but again, we've seen the environment around us and we've tried to create a shape within it, and that's showing a level of real sort of, you know, photographic creativity, which is really good. These branches here could just be lost in post if we can. They're just a little bit distracting on the right hand side there. We go back to the world of wrestling. Okay, I mean, yeah, I mean it's a very tight crop. I want to see, it's very raw, but the faces are a little bit too hidden for me. The blue on the left hand side is just a little bit distracting in terms of that. The yellow here is a little bit jarring. I know we want to keep the colour in for the blood. This is possibly the one shot where maybe if we went to the black and white with the red colour spotting, it might have worked. But I want to see a bit more of the face in here, really, to sort of see a little bit more of what's actually going on and the result of the actions that are sort of are happening there. But it's certainly a close shot that fills the frame and feels intense in there. This is a lovely angle again. You've done well, actually, I think, to highlight what a beautiful dress that is. The lovely shape throughout, and the tonality here has been really well captured. It's a shame we haven't got a bit more light on the hands, is what I would say. And as always, like, I think we've chosen a low angle, which is good for getting the dress and getting the hands. It's not so good for faces. It's not so good because we're shooting up noses, and we sort of compress. We make jaws look bigger than they are, and everything's all at a little bit of a funny angle. We started to lose some of the detail of the marquee and everything in the background. They're just starting to get blown out. And there's no real catch lights in the eyes. There's nothing really there to sort of sing and to make these eyes look, you know, sparkling and all that kind of thing. And there's not enough light on that hand to say that we're drawing our attention to this henna, which is a shame. I think what we've done there to make the dress look great is impressive, but I just think everything else is just letting it down a little bit. The crop on the fingernails here, they're not quite pin sharp. We've got a line going through the hand on this side as well from the marquee. It's just all a little bit cluttered there, and just a little bit of a misfire, sadly. But I think, like I said, it's an interesting angle. We'll just keep experimenting with it. And in these situations, if you're, I don't know whether you're working this wedding or whether you're a guest at this wedding, but you know, just speak to the bride, and so many people are fascinated by trying to get these natural wedding images that are of the moment, and they're really important. They're kind of difficult to get though, and you really need to be working on long lenses so people don't know that you're there, or really wide and getting in super close. Kevin Mullins does that as a wedding photographer to sort of like an expert level. I think we're neither one way or the other with this one, so don't be afraid to interact with the people and get them to sort of maybe just show off their hands and just do something a little bit different and work with the light a little bit more effectively. So thank you very much, Arvind, for sending in your work for us to review. I hope you found it useful. I hope everyone who's watched this video has found it useful and helpful too. If you would like to be brave enough to send your images in for a nice friendly photo review, you can do. You can send it to portraitofwrestler@gmail.com. You can follow me on the Instagram and the Twitter. It's @Y2Jimbob. And as ever, all the very best.